So did everybody have a nice Christmas? Yeah, a good Christmas, that's good. It's, I really do pray that you had a day that was not just nice, but also one that was, how shall I say, miraculous, yeah? Filled with wonder, because a miracle, of course, is anything that is wonderful, yeah? Many, if not all of you, including myself, were expecting miracles this Christmas, right? Did you? I won't ask if you got the miracle that you were looking for, but I did mention, you might recall last week, that I know that there are people that have told me that miracles have already happened and begun to happen in people's lives, and it's a really wonderful thing, and I'm wondering if there might be even more of them happening. In fact, yesterday afternoon, I got a text shortly before the 4:30 Mass, and the text basically said to the effect, if anyone was still looking for a miracle, here's one that they might need. I know that there were a few people that were looking for jobs, or new jobs at least, so the text went that Mrs. T's is hiring. Yeah. Seriously, yeah, it's serious, And if that was the miracle that you were looking for, well, there you have it. Call Mrs. T's tomorrow morning. And on that note, if you did have a miracle happen these last days, if you haven't told me about it, if you wish, you can. You don't have to. Write it down, write out what happened, and get it to me. You can email it or send it in. You can do it anonymously if you like, just so that I get a sense of what kind of things are happening, and to be able to share those, anonymously with everyone, because, that encouragement of, experiencing God and God working in our lives is really so important and so powerful. If you didn't experience a miracle this Christmas, well, it's not too late, because, Christmas isn't over, right? The world Christmas is over. They've already stopped playing Christmas music out there on the radio. But for us, in our world, church world, it goes on for a couple of more weeks anyhow. So there's still time, not to worry. There's still time. So I was thinking about that. I thought of two little things, short things, to kind of keep in mind about looking for miracles. The first thing is that, when you ask, God always answers. When you pray, God always answers our prayers. When you ask Him to do something or ask for something, God always answers. Always, always. Of course, the answer that we generally look for and the answer that we generally like to hear is yes, when we ask Him for something, right? Isn't that what we like? We prefer that answer. And that's good when that happens, and because sometimes those are the ones that God says, yeah, that's really what I'd like for you, yes. But sometimes God has other answers for us. The other answer that God often has is the one that we don't generally like. It's usually that word that is maybe the third word that we learn in our vocabulary after mom and dad, or dad and mom, whichever order it comes. The third word. You know what the third word is we generally learn? No. Yeah. Sometimes God, and that's an answer. We don't like the answer, but it's an answer. And then there's that other answer, not yet. That's a legitimate answer, not yet. So if you're experiencing a storm still in these days, God does have a miracle in store for you. He really does. What it is, I don't know, but God really does have a miracle. So keep looking and keep asking. Don't stop. Don't stop looking. Don't stop asking. That miracle is there someplace. The second thing is something that I alluded to a couple of weeks ago, and something that this gospel today and this feast of the Holy Family really kind of directs us to. It's that one essential thing that I think most parents strive to teach their children, the one aspect of life that's so important to us. And it's really here in the gospel where Luke tells us that they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions, and all who heard him were astounded at his answers and his understanding. So there's Jesus sitting with the scribes and the Pharisees, listening to them, asking them questions, talking to them, answering their questions, having a conversation. And he does so in a way that is, well, the gospel tells us it's astounding that he's able to do that. As I think about that, I say to myself, this is a 12-year-old boy. I've worked with a lot of 12-year-old boys over the years, and I had to be honest and tell you, there's not too many of them that I recall that have the ability to sit still for any length of time and really listen and have a conversation like that. Pretty astounding. A minor miracle in and of itself, wouldn't you say? Yeah. But that's what Jesus is doing in this. He's listening. And for you who are parents, especially with young children, but even if you were a parent, because your children are all grown now or looking to be a parent sometime in the future, isn't that one of the lessons that you want your children to learn? You'd like them to listen a little bit more, listen a little bit better to what you have to say. In fact, it makes life easier. Jesus later on in the Gospels, he tells his disciples about this. He says to them, "The scribes and the Pharisees have taken their seat at the chair of Moses. Therefore do and observe all things whatsoever they tell you." The scribes and the Pharisees, they're in a position of authority, and they have a legitimate authority, and therefore because of that legitimate authority, he tells his disciples, he tells you and I, that we ought to listen to them. We ought to listen to the people in our lives who have authority over us and do as they say. That really is at the heart of what it means to be a disciple. And that root word, listen, really is that quality that, well, if you desire a miracle from God, it's going to happen if you have this particular quality. Jesus does. Jesus has it. The gospel tells us that he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. You know what word I'm looking at on that page, don't you? Yeah. Obedience. That's the key. That really is the key. And stop and think about it. Jesus is the Son of God. He knows he's the Son of God. The story tells us that he was in his Father's house, and that was where he was supposed to be. That's where God wanted him to be. That's where he believed his Father wanted him to be. And yet, he is obedient to Mary and Joseph. He goes with them to live in Nazareth. All the miracles in the Gospels and all the miracles of Christmas, and there are many, happen because the players were obedient to God's plan for them in their lives. They did what God asked them to do. They followed God's will. And because of their obedience, God was able to act in their lives. And that's why God sometimes turns nature on its head to get us to pay attention, to get us to better understand his plan, to get us to be obedient. God sometimes has to turn things around for us so that we can see where he wants us to go. And stop and think about it. Again, as parents, isn't that really what you want to instill in your children? And if we're all children of God, certainly God wants to instill that in us, to be obedient. Because if we don't obey, if we don't listen, we know that only bad things are going to happen. Only bad things can happen when we are not that way. So, simply, the next time someone asks you to do something or tells you to do something, and something that might be difficult or challenging, but not morally wrong, consider the miracle that is in the offing. Consider what blessing God wants to bestow in your life. Consider what God's plan is, and do as he asks.